Maybe I should change my name actually and make it less confusing. Maybe I should graduate to Nkosi, not Nkosana. Otherwise I'll get into trouble. Thanks very much for giving me the opportunity of sharing some thoughts. I'm not going to make a big speech because, you know, when I was trying to prepare for this, I've been to a lot of conferences and the same things get peddled all the time, the same conversations, and I thought to myself, I should avoid making a speech. But what I want to do is share with you a few slides and then explore the concept of the architecture of economic integration. Because in my opinion, Africa is struggling. In fact, I think the integration agenda is stalled, to put it bluntly. And we need to try and understand, in a non-sort of business as usual way, what it is that's standing in the way. And I thought I would take you to Europe and visit a project which fascinates me, whose history fascinates me, the Airbus project. Before the early 70s, there was no Airbus. And then you can see the evolution, and I've just taken 3 European airlines and the evolution of their national airlines in terms of composition. And as you can see, by 2013, Lufthansa had within its fleet by number more than 80% of its aircraft were Airbus. And the British Airways, which is the most conservative given the special relationship with Boeing and the US, even BA, had gone up to 45% of composition by number of its aircraft in that fleet was Airbus. And Air France, you can see, 70%. And when you look at this, it's sort of curious, but I think it also begins to inform us. It might inform us what a successful architecture of economic integration might look like. The Airbus, some of you I'm sure are aware of this, is assembled finally, at least the European elements, in France. But curiously, its components are manufactured virtually all over Europe. What I'm showing here is what I call sub-assemblies, not even components. The distributed manufacturing of components is even broader than the countries you see here. So in the formulation of an integrated passenger aircraft industry in Europe, the 3 big countries, France, Germany, and the UK, did something quite interesting. They did not hold the manufacture of aircraft, passenger aircraft in Europe. They deliberately distributed the participation in the manufacture of componentry in order to integrate at a sort of what I call self-interested level. So it was a question of how do I benefit in participating in this product at my national level in order to be part of this and make it succeed. So in one stroke of a pen, in a manner of speaking, they created self-interest in job creation in each nation, but also very smartly created a market for the finished product. That's why you see the evolution of those airlines where they do. They didn't just manufacture, but they also bought the final product. Then when we come to our continent, one of the things that we're going to hear is, but it's complicated. 54 countries, very different infrastructure development levels. That is true. But again, when you go back to the Airbus project, they created specific, when needed, specific infrastructure to move all of those sub-assemblies to where they are finally needed. Specially created to make this project work. So it's not a question of where each country was. It's a question of, if you wanted to deliver on this project, what would you need to do to develop the necessary delivery mechanisms? And that's what you see. They even developed particular aircraft for flying components around the group. So it can be done, in spite of the different levels of infrastructure development. What is intriguing also is that you could almost like say the European component of the Airbus was phase 1. The next phase is to globalize this approach. And as you see, a few months ago, there was a high Chinese dignitary visiting Europe. At about the same time that he was in Europe, there was an announcement of a huge order of Airbuses by China. Guess why? The Airbus is now assembled in China. And so the next phase of that European project is that they are going to conquer global markets by buying in, if I may call it that, in a self-interested way, devolving the manufacture of the Airbus into the markets which they want to capture. That's what they're going to do. In Africa, you may or may not be aware that of the 3 largest airlines, African airlines, I suppose no, more than that actually. So, but if we take sub-Saharan Africa, there is Ethiopian, there is Kenyan, and then there is South Africa. Which one is got the largest Airbus fleet? South Africa. And what's the reason? South Africa is a country supplies components to Airbus industries. Did you know that? Yeah. Yeah. So you know, when you look at life this way, it's actually a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer in terms of how we form partnerships. When we say, and I was listening very carefully, all of the speakers who spoke, they were using the word we. And I kept asking myself, who actually is included in that we? Who is we? Then, Lynette, when we were showing the progress that we've made and then the support and the funding and all of that, I also tried to see whether I could identify a single private sector company from outside of South Africa, from the rest of Africa. I mean, I know there is sort of companies from further abroad, but I struggled. In fact, I didn't see any. I didn't see an Nigerian company. I didn't see a Kenyan company. I didn't see an Ethiopian company. So who is we? What does we mean? Can you really achieve economic integration without answering that question in a very strategic way? Who is at the table in it? So I think we just need to sit back and think. I'm just putting this up to say, if I came back to you and presented the airline fleet's evolution 10 years from now, because of the phase 2 of Airbus that I described to you, you find that the global market for Airbus will have changed significantly because they are taking manufacturing into the countries and markets which they want to integrate into their product line. That's what they want to do. So what goes into effective economic integration? I've put a few pointers here, not by any means exhaustive, but I think one of the key issues is that right up front, when you come to me, as Nkosana and say to me, I would like you to partner me in implementing this program, project, whatever it is. You need to show me right up front how the benefits that flow from this cooperation are going to be distributed. What is my participation in the benefits that are going to flow from this? My understanding, I'm not an economist, but I think traditional and maybe what I may call classical economics tends to say to us, as long as the tide is rising, don't worry too much about which boat you're sitting in. I say, sorry, that's not practical. It's not practical. For as long as I'm a public servant responsible for citizens who reside within a particular nation state, it is my responsibility to care and to know that my involvement is going to be explainable to these citizens who sit in these boundaries. It's not that I can say to them, Africa as a whole is benefiting, therefore it's okay, just go along. It doesn't work that way. And I think that Airbus configuration or architecture talks to this issue. Try to understand that each will need to account to its citizens in terms of why it's part of this club. What are the benefits? How are the benefits shared? I just want to pick a few examples, but not all. The other key issue for me is that economic integration is not an economic project. Economic integration is a political economic project. It's not an economic project. It's a political project. You need both political considerations as well as economic considerations in alignment. Why? Because unfortunately, whether we like it or not, the world is not run really explicitly anyway by business people. The world is run by politicians. And business people don't go through regular elections to be voted for. Yes, you can say an AGM does that, but politicians explicitly go to constituents to vote for them every so often. They may play around without the elections are done, but they have to go to their citizens. So unless they are an account to their citizens for the things that they are doing and who they are doing them with, they are not likely to be re-elected. So you cannot just say we're going to look at the economic considerations only without looking at the political considerations. And I'll come back to this at the end. Another key point is that, and this is where I think it's really important for South Africa to get this. When you look at what happened in Europe, France, the UK, and Germany could have done the Airbus without anybody else. They didn't need, actually, to include all of the other small European countries in the manufacture of components and sub-assemblies to make that project succeed. So they sacrificed those with more capacity who want to lead. You have to be prepared also to lead from behind and lead by giving away certain benefits in order to create the cohesion that is necessary. Now, I think what that means to me is that countries like South Africa and Nigeria need to understand they've got a responsibility which is proportionate to their capacity and their size and their economic might. And they cannot look at themselves and look at, at the risk of going where others have traded badly. Look at Malawi and say, I'm going to share my responsibilities. And it just does not work that way. When you've got, almost like biblically, when more is given to you, more is expected from you. And your leadership can be defined in terms of how you are prepared to show and lead by example. So let's go back. One of the things that I think bothers me about our continent is that we are too socialist in our approach. And I tend to talk bluntly, and it gets me into trouble, but I think you will only understand what I'm getting at if I give you what I think. I think we're too socialist. Well, what do I mean by that? Africa has got 54 countries. We know for a fact that if you want the continent to progress, those 54 countries are not going to be in phase with each other every step of the way. It's not possible. So what Africa needs to be prepared to do is to look at those countries that get it, whatever the agenda is, such as NEPAD, for instance. Those countries that get it ought to be prepared to move on ahead of the laggards. And they create a framework which says, when you are ready, you can join, but we're not going to wait for you. And if we adopt that approach, our continent will move ahead much, much faster. At the moment, what we're doing is we're holding ourselves back because we're trying to accommodate the others. The slowest member determines the speed, as opposed to those who are vanguard determine the speed. Why are we doing that? As long as you don't close the club and say it's only for these members, but you say it's open when you're ready to join, by all means, and then the rest can get on with it. So I think it's a key point. The other point is that South Africa again, I think South Africa in particular, earlier when I was talking, I think it was Jeff, where I said only yesterday I had a quotation from Julius Nyerere which I was not aware of. Apparently Julius Nyerere said, the African continent will help South Africa attain its freedom. But South Africa should help the rest of the continent develop. What does that mean? What does it look like? At the moment, my perception is that South Africa wants to treat the rest of the continent as a market to sell things to, as opposed to a partner to develop the African economy with. And I think the two are not the same. So if you want to develop, if you want to integrate with African economies, if you want in fact to develop an African economy, we have to look for every opportunity to diversify participation in economic activity and include those who don't have capacity and facilitate for them to come along for as long as they are committed to this. So if I'm an ESCOM, just to pick an example, an ESCOM on transport, I'll use companies that are big and you understand them. You know, you want to build, let's just take SADC. You want to build a SADC facilitating railway system. You don't have to have everything done in South Africa. You can go and again, I'll use my country as illustrative because I know a little bit about it. During the Federation of Rhodesia in Nyasaland, Bulawayo used to be the center of the railway operations. So there were massive workshops there. They are not dilapidated, I know. But the rehabilitation of those workshops will not take very much. So if Transnet said to Zimbabwe, we want to develop a system where you are a participant, and we're going to put some of the rolling stock manufacturing in Bulawayo, all of a sudden, the conversation you have is very different. And what is interesting for me is that we all know as business people that moving goods and people in Africa is traumatic, to put it very mildly. But the minute you create in the next door country a benefit for them and blocking that. So if you're manufacturing rolling stock in Bulawayo and you need to move that into the market around, suddenly Zimbabwe is interested in making its borders function properly. Welcome business people and so on and so forth for its own interest purposes. But in that process, you also then find it easier to move your goods into Zimbabwe and out of and whatever. So self-interest. And I think personally, the architecture of economic integration is something we should really, really pay attention to if we want to succeed. And as far as the NEPAD Business Foundation is concerned, I would say again, let's take a step back and say, every time we say we, without becoming socialist, as I've just said, who strategically should be in the we? If we're going to succeed, who should be in that we? Let me come back to, just in closing, come back to the nation state level. I think the private sector and the public sector absolutely must work together, but that's to be, it's just, public sector is government. But I think there is two key ministries or departments that have got absolutely behind the table. Department of Foreign Affairs and Industry and Trade. These must be partners, absolutely. Because when you look at all of this travel nonsense that goes on the continent, we welcome outsiders more easily onto our continent than we welcome African citizens in terms of visas and all manner of things. So you need the ministers of foreign affairs to come to the table with the NEPAD Business Foundation and have a conversation about how we facilitate movement of people. Without movement of people, there's no movement of capital in goods. So we need to tackle that. Then we need to tackle the issue of the Ministry of Industry and Trade. Because if we're going to go for a distributed manufacturing system, there need to be our agents in each country that we choose to come as the vanguard group. What does that look like? What does the architecture look like? And facilitative conversations that should take place. I don't think, I'm sure that I'm telling you things which are very obvious. They are very obvious to me anyway. My only frustration is, why is it not happening? Why is it not happening? I've just shown you and shared with you an example of maybe a slightly different approach. Let's choose a few countries. Let's choose a few private sector companies whose products lend themselves to this approach. And let's choose a product, easiest one to start off with, and let's create a habit of doing this and get over the barriers to entry psychologically, which will then, I think, allow this to happen. Thank you very much.